You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice Radio, Episode 2. I'm your host, David Gornoski. In this episode, I speak with Mr. Daryl Davis, the star of the brand new documentary, Accidental Courtesy. The film explores his lifelong quest to befriend heads of the KKK and find out just why they have the views they do, and if it's possible to break through on a personal friendship basis and crack the wall of hate. Enjoy. I saw the trailer for your movie, Accidental Courtesy, and I was very intrigued by it. I shared it on my Facebook wall and got probably 100 shares on it. It went crazy, so people really are interested in your project.
Well, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's going to air nationwide on PBS on February the 13th at 10 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay. So
they have a program called Independent Lens.
Okay, and so that's February the 13th? Okay.
Yeah, the day before Valentine's Day.
Okay, well, great. And we'll put a note on that, too, for everybody that wants to check it out. Is it available on demand or?
Not yet.
Okay.
After the 21st, I think it goes, after the 13th, it goes to iTunes and then Netflix.
Okay, great. My project is called A Neighbor's Choice. So A Neighbor's Choice is we try to promote Christian nonviolence and work out systemic problems that ail neighbors, relationships, sometimes generationally, and we try to look at them through kind of the lens of imitating Jesus in everything we do. And so I was very interested in your story. And how it relates to the idea of piercing through the veil, so to speak, of groupthink and seeing our neighbors as ourselves.
Okay.
I'm a writer. I write for several publications, and I also do this podcast. And so one of the things that we tend to emphasize is that whether you're a Christian or not, the world would do well to consider imitating the life of Jesus in everything we do. You know, whether it's how we treat people who are caught up in nonviolent offense, such as drug use or prostitution, or even nanny state laws, like, you know, there's laws against selling raw milk from a cow. There's all these laws that criminalize nonviolent behavior. And so we explore how society can move towards a place where we learn to not hit people or threaten people with coercion to get what we want. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of just wanted to explore some of the themes that were touched upon in your story. What you did was very interesting, and it's raised a lot of attention around the media. I've seen a lot of stories and a lot of some controversy. If you could you give an overview basically of the general story that the Accidental Courtesy film conveys?
Well, it shows what I do with my life on my own. You know, nobody paid me to do what I do. It was a choice that I made based upon things that had happened to me. I had formed a question in my mind. Well, as a child, I had, some racist experiences that I could not understand how somebody could attack me or whatever just because of the color of my skin, and they didn't even know me.
Right.
So I formed a question that was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? Mm-hmm. And at the age of 10 was when I had this experience. And then 5 years later, at 15, I had more experiences. And I decided I wanted to learn as much about this ideology as I could. So I bought books on white supremacy, black supremacy, anti-Semitism, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, just to try to understand where this is coming from, because I knew that people were not born with this ideology. They acquired it from somewhere. Where did they get it? Where is it going? How can it be addressed? And how can people hate me without even knowing me? But I was unable to get my answer. So in later years, as an adult, I was still seeking that answer. I went to college. I got my degree in music. So my profession is being a musician. But my obsession was learning more about race relations. And I figured, well, who better to get my answer from than someone who would join an organization whose whole premise is hating those who do not look like them and who do not believe as they believe. So I began seeking out members of the KKK, members and leaders up north, down south, Midwest, West, etc. And I'm from Chicago originally, but I live here in Maryland. And so I started here in Maryland where I live and just branched out. And I wrote a book on the topic. My book is called Clandestine, spelled with a K, not a C, Relationships, Clandestine Relationships. And it was the first book written by a black author on the Ku Klux Klan from the perspective of sitting down and talking face to face with these people. All the other books were written by white authors, except for two. There were two books written by black authors, but not from the perspective of sitting down and interviewing the people. Each author detailed how he escaped a lynching, one in the 1930s and one in the 1940s. I wanted to sit down face to face with my would-be lynchers and find out, why would you lynch me? You don't even know me, kind of thing. So as a result of all the publicity that the book got and still continues to get, even though it came out in '98, I took it out of print a couple of years ago. I'm revising it now, and we'll put it back out in the spring. But a lot of different movie makers, documentary makers, etc., have contacted me over the years and want to do a documentary. And this last one, the guys who filmed Accidental Courtesy had approached me, and we went over what they wanted, and they seemed like good people and wanted to get the story right, etc. So I agreed and signed on, and we did this movie. And the movie shows me, going around the country, meeting with neo-Nazis and Ku Klux Klan people, those who are still in the Klan, those who have gotten out of the Klan, etc. And then also meeting with some black activists who disagree with what I do. So it's a whole composite of people who agree, people who disagree, and then we even included some people, or Mark Potok from the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they've had a great success at destroying some of the Klan groups in the country through legal means by bankrupting them, suing them in court. And he disagrees with what I do, which is fine. But I've been successful in what I do as one person, and I continue to do that. So that's what the film is about.
Well, that's a great summary. How old were you when you first met your first Klansman for this project, this investigation you embarked on?
For the project, this would be 1990, 91. Mm-hmm. I'm 58 now. Mm-hmm. So I was 31, 32?
Yeah. So kind of take us back to that moment where what were you thinking?
Actually, even back before that, when I first sat down and interviewed somebody, mm-hmm. For my, you're talking about for the film or for my book?
Or for your book, for your whole, your investigation.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what happened was this. I'm a musician, and in 1983, I was playing in a country western band. Country music had made a big resurgence in this country, so a lot of places that were, top 40, that kind of thing, had crossed over to country. So, I wanted to play music as my living. I had my degree, and, I didn't want to go, work some other job that was non-musical, since I spent 4 years, learning how to play music. Mm-hmm. So I joined this country band, and we worked quite a bit. And there was a bar in a town called Frederick, Maryland, called the Silver Dollar Lounge. It was a truck stop bar, because it was a motel where all these truckers coming down the highway would stop and stay overnight or whatever, and restaurant and a lounge. And the band had played there before. This is my first time in there. It was an all-white lounge. And when I say all white in this particular case, I do not mean that that black people were not allowed to go in there. What I mean is that black people did not go in there, and that was by their own choice. And it was a good choice because they were not welcome. Well, here I was in the $Silver Lounge for the first time with this band. Like I said, they'd been there before. And when I came off the bandstand after the first set and was going to go sit down at the table, this white gentleman came up behind me and put his arm around my shoulder. I turned around to see who was touching me, and he says, "I really like your all's music. You know, I've seen this here band before, but I had never seen you before. Where'd you come from?" And I shook his hand, and I told him, "Thank you." I explained, you know, that this was my first time here, but yes, the band had been here before. He goes, "Well, man, I really like your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis." And I wasn't offended, but I was kind of surprised that he did not know the origin of Jerry Lee's piano style. And I explained to him, I said, "Well, Jerry Lee got that style from the same place I got mine." I said, "It comes from black, blues, and boogie-woogie piano playing. That's where rock and roll and rockabilly comes from." Okay. "Oh, no. You know, Jerry Lee invented that. I ain't never heard no black man play piano like that, except for you." And so I'm thinking, well, this guy obviously has never seen Little Richard or Fats Domino. He just thinks Jerry Lee was it. And so we argued back and forth. The guy wasn't buying what I was saying. Even after I told him, you know, that Jerry Lee Lewis is a friend of mine. I know him. He's told me himself, you know, where he learned. And the guy didn't buy it. But he wanted to buy me a drink. And I don't drink alcohol. And I went back to his table. And he had a friend sitting there. And he ordered a cranberry juice from me at my request. And when he came back when the waitress came back with the cranberry juice, he took his glass and he clinked my glass and cheered me. And then he says, "You know, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man." And I'm thinking, you know, what is wrong with this guy? I mean, this guy is probably in his mid to late 40s. Here I was, 25 years old, and I sat down with white people or anybody else thousands of times, thousands of them, and had a beverage, a meal, a conversation. This guy had never sat down with a black guy before. And I wasn't trying to be facetious. I just innocently asked him. I said, "Why?" I was naive. I said, "Why?" And at first he didn't answer me. He looked down at the tabletop. I asked him again, and his buddy elbowed him and said, Tell him. I said, "Tell me." He looked back at me and said, "I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan." Well, I started laughing because I didn't believe him. I thought, you know, he was pulling my leg. You know, why would a Klansman, you know, put his arm around me, praise my piano playing, want to buy me a drink and hang out with me at his table? You know, everything I knew about the Klan, you know, did not work that way. So while I'm laughing, he goes inside his pocket, flips through his wallet, and hands me his Klan card. And I recognize the Ku Klux Klan insignia, this little red circle with a white cross and blood drop in the center. And I realized, you know, this thing was for real. So I stopped laughing and I gave it back to him. And we discussed the Klan and some other things. And he gave me his phone number and wanted me to call him anytime I was to return to this bar, because he wanted to bring his Klanswomen and Klansmen friends to come here to see this black guy play like Jerry Lee Lewis. So I would call him every 6 weeks whenever the band was there. And he would come and he would bring, you know, Klan members with him. And they would gather around the bandstand and watch me play. When we took a break, I would go to his table and hang out with him. Some members would stay there. They wanted to meet me. They were curious about me. Others would like get up and scurry away and would not return until I went back on stage. You know, they wanted nothing to do with me except to watch me. Mm-hmm. So, you know, this went on until the end of 1983, and at which time I quit the band and I joined another band or started my own band, you know, and played whatever was going on in 1984. And so I really had no reason to stay in contact with the guy. And then it dawned on me, you know, that was the perfect opportunity to ask my question. It had fallen in my lap. And it happened by surprise because I wasn't looking at it, so I really wasn't thinking about it. And I said, you know what? I need to write a book. You know, here I spent, you know, several months sitting around with some Klansmen every time I go to this gig up here. And I should have asked him, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And he's been just as friendly as could be to me. So something's going on there. So let me contact him and see if he will put me in touch with the Grand Dragon. Now let me explain to you how the hierarchy of the Klan works. There is no such thing as the Ku Klux Klan any longer. It used to be one centralized Klan group and then chapters off that same group. But today you have all these autonomous Ku Klux Klan groups that have all splintered off of each other and splintered off of the original, and they do not get along with each other, basically. So they all call themselves Ku Klux Klan. They use basically the same bylaws, the same titles, the same secret passwords and handshakes, and same colors on their robes, designating their rank, etc. But they are separate Klan groups. You might have the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the Dixie Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the Territorial Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, on and on and on. These are separate Klan groups. So anyway, if you have a chapter of your particular Klan, well, if you have a chapter in your state, you need a state leader. And that state leader is called what we would call the governor. They call that individual the Grand Dragon. Mm-hmm. If you have chapters in multiple states, then you need someone who oversees all the states, what we would call the president. They would call the imperial wizard. And then within the state, you have counties. A county leader is known as the Great Titan. Within the county, you have districts. We would call that individual like a mayor, a councilman, an alderman. That individual is known as the Exalted Cyclops. So there was a guy named Roger Kelly who was the Grand Dragon for the state of Maryland. And I contacted the guy that I met in the Silver Dollar Lounge, and I persuaded him to give me the information for Roger Kelly, his phone number and his home address. And he did so reluctantly, under the condition that I would not tell Mr. Kelly where I got it. And so I had my secretary, who was white, phone Roger Kelly and tell him that she's working for somebody who's writing a book on the Ku Klux Klan. Would he consent to sitting down and interviewing with me? And I specifically instructed her, do not tell Mr. Kelly that I'm black unless he asks. If he asks, then don't lie to him. Go ahead and tell him, but don't give him reason to ask. Now, I could have called him myself, but I didn't want to do so because the guy who gave me the information, he told me not to fool with Roger Kelly, that Roger Kelly would kill me. He hated black people, etc. And I figured, well, if I call the guy, he might pick up in my voice, that I'm black and, I'm not talking to you, and click. And then my whole project would have ended before it even got started. Right. But I knew that if she called, he would automatically know by her voice that she was white. And he would not automatically assume that this white woman is working for a black man, especially a black man who's writing a book about the Klan, because, they did not exist. So that would increase my odds of him agreeing to sit down with me. And then once we got face to face and he saw what I am, then he could decide if he wants to stay and do the interview or leave or attack me or whatnot. So she called and she was successful in getting him, and he agreed to do the interview. He didn't ask what color I was. So this took place in 1990, 91. And he was the first interview. But as far as meeting, a Klansman on friendly terms, that guy in the bar was the first one that I met on friendly terms. I got in, the very first one that I met was shortly before that. I pulled into a parking lot and a man was beating up a woman on the sidewalk. He was sitting on top of her and banging her head into the back of her head into the sidewalk and punching her in the face. And I got out of my car, and then he got up off of her and attacked me. And, I had to defend myself. And I put him down, and then the police came. And it was something was odd. People were standing around watching him beat this woman and not doing anything. And I just had to pull in to a space, maybe a couple car widths away from where this was happening. And when I got out of the car, he called me a name, a racial name, and I asked me if I wanted a piece of him. And I said, well, I want you off of her. And so he got up and attacked me. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't until I beat him that people called the police. And so then they came, and something was just not quite right. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but they told him to leave the premises and that if he were to come back on that property within 24 hours, they would arrest him for trespassing because they had ordered him off the property. Okay, and when he left, I got all his information because they would not arrest him. I wanted him arrested for assault, and they would not arrest him. And then I went inside and I got ice off of this lady's head. I put ice on her head and all that kind of stuff. And even though he was the one who got hurt, not me, I decided I was going to take him to court anyway. Mm-hmm. And just for attacking me. And she agreed to go with me, as a witness, and I agreed to go with her as her witness to what he had done to her. Well, long story short, turns out that she was his ex-fiancée, and she had broken up with him, and he didn't want to let go. Mm-hmm. And when I went to pick her up a few months later, when the court date came, on the ride up to the courthouse, she told me that he was a member of the Klan, and he was also a Frederick County firefighter, a fireman.
Wow!
And he was a lieutenant in the fire department. And then I made the connection why the cops did not arrest him, because they knew him. The police and the fire department, they all know each other, especially in a small town. And so that was the deal. What had happened was he had been promoted up in rank to lieutenant in the fire department, and had been out celebrating and had gotten drunk and had gone off on her. And so the cops just, gave him a pass. But anyway, when I went to the commissioner, I had to fill out a warrant for him, and so it was served, and he was arrested. Then I took him to court, and I beat him there. So
wow.
that was my first encounter with a Klansman.
So when you do these interviews, I mean, at least at the beginning, when you first started, were you nervous? Did you not really get bothered by the details? I mean, how did you get adrenaline pumping? How's that like walking into that situation? I mean, I just as a kid, I grew up in Florida, and I remember when we were young, the only time I had seen the Klan, and this is in the 90s, early 90s, is they were protesting Earth Day. But even for a white person like me, they were scary as a kid. I was like, wow, what is this? It's got such a they create such a reputation in the popular imagination. And
yeah, because they have that history of all that baggage behind.
Right.
No, I was not afraid of them or anything like that, or my adrenaline flowing, because I had studied them so much. I knew as much, if not more, about them than they knew about themselves. I have a vast library on that topic, mm-hmm. and I went in knowing what to expect, knowing what the mentality would be, knowing that I was, basically a persona non grata with them. So I was not expecting them to hug me and let's all be friends here. I knew that they felt I was, inferior to them, and sure enough, they told me that. But I was willing to accept whatever they want to say, because I'm the one trying to learn from them. I want to learn what makes them think this way. How can they hate me when they don't even know me? And I'm not going to learn anything if I go in there and attack them.
So did you ever ask that question point blank to them?
Absolutely.
And what would be the response? I mean,
there were various responses. Some would say, well, because you're inferior, you're tearing down the country. You move into our neighborhoods, and the neighborhood gets trashed. This is what black people do. You don't get an education. Da da da. You look at your test scores, that kind of thing. And then some would say, well, we don't hate anybody. We just prefer our own. We love our own race. And we don't see any reason why we should mix with other races. Why do you want to mix? Why do you want to mix up your race? You should stay in your race and be pure, and let us be pure. So they had all kinds of different, reasons. Mm-hmm. But in the end, though, with a lot of them, not every one of them, because there'll be those who will go to their graves being racist, hateful, and violent. But in the end, there were a good number of them, who ended up quitting the Klan and becoming very good friends of mine. And today I own their robes and hoods. And they said, they could not answer the question. because there was no reason to hate me.
Mm-hmm.
They admitted, you know what, I'm hating you without even knowing it, and there's knowing why. I can't answer that question. So that would turn them around.
What was that light bulb moment? Was it just a slow, steady transition for these people when they have that realization that what they're doing is ridiculous?
Both. Some of it was very slow over a few years, couple years. Some were a lot faster. You know, a couple weeks, couple months, few months. It all depended. Like, let me give you a few different scenarios. But let me go back to, you asked me if I ever had any feelings. I didn't have any feelings going into it. Yeah, there were times, when I was threatened, and times, when I was attacked, and of course I had to defend myself. But I never went in fearful. I mean, I was always aware that, yes, I'm entering into a dangerous situation, and somebody could just go off for whatever reason. But it was a chance that I had to take. Now, the first time when we set up an interview, we were set up inside this motel room, and the Grand Dragon came himself with his bodyguard, which is known as a Grand Nighthawk, and we were there in the room, and he was wearing a suit and tie, dark blue suit and tie, and he's sitting across the table from me, and he had a briefcase with him, and the bodyguard was wearing military camouflage, standing at his right, and he had a gun, a semi-automatic handgun on his hip. And so we did this interview, and at the end of the interview, I asked him if he by chance brought his robe and hood with him. And he said yes, it was in the case, in the briefcase. So I asked him if he would put it on and let me take some pictures, and he agreed. So he stood up and put the briefcase on the bed in the motel room, popped it open, pulled out his Grand Dragon robe, and he went over and stood in front of my mirror on the dresser and put on his hood and his robe, and his bodyguard Nighthawk was fixing his cape and his sash and all that. And I'm just sitting there at the table in the room watching this. Now, I've seen the Klan, march up and down the street, but I never, had one in my hotel room, putting on his robe and hood. Mm-hmm. And while this guy was sitting across the table from me in a suit and tie, yes, we disagreed on a lot of stuff. There were some things we agreed on, but we disagreed on a lot of stuff pertaining to race. And we never got violent or rude. Every now and then, we might have raised the decibel level of our voices to make a point in arguing or whatever, but we never got violent or rude. But when he was over there in front of the mirror putting on this stuff, and I'm sitting there watching, it's hard for me to describe to you what I was feeling, because I was feeling so many different emotions at one time. I felt angry. I felt bitter. I felt sad. I felt violent. Mm-hmm. All because of all the things that people who wore robes just like him had done to people of my ancestry and of my color.
Right.
And I knew that I had to keep myself in check, rather than just explode and go jump on him and attack him or attack the bodyguard or whatever. I had to remind myself, now, Daryl, wait a minute, hold on. You invited this guy here, and he didn't have to come, but he came to oblige you, and he saw you, and he came inside the room and sat down and allowed you to interview him. And then you asked him to put on his robe and hood. So what are you going to do? He complied with your wishes, so what are you going to do, beat him up for it? No, you don't do that. So, I kept myself in check, and I took some pictures of him. I posted some pictures with him, and then he would later on become one of my best friends. He moved up the ladder from Grand Dragon, state leader, to Imperial Wizard, national leader. He was head over 13 different states, and including, I think Florida might have been one of them. And then over time, he began rethinking his ideology, and today I have his Imperial Wizard's robe, and he and I are good friends. He's no longer in the Klan.
What does he think of your movie?
He hasn't seen the movie yet. Yeah, it won't be out until February 13th.
have some of the Klansmen that you've befriended, have they had qualms about, you know, your film and book projects once they, you know, they became friends with you personally, and then they saw the public message of the film? Has that bothered them, and do they understand fully and agree with what you're doing? I mean, how far?
They pretty much understand fully and agree. There are some that has caused some problems for, because it's given them publicity that has cost them jobs and notoriety, you know, they didn't want. Because, you know, when they got out of the Klan, you know, people would know, hey, you know, that guy who works at that store, that guy who works at that company, you know, he used to be the leader of the Klan. Well, then that word would travel, and next thing you know, he was losing his job, which should not have happened.
Right.
But, you know, but people, you know, judge you by the company you keep. And so they would find reasons to fire him. And so he would drift from job to job. But prior to that, he would come out with me and speak out against, you know, what he formerly believed.
And when these people, I mean, I know that everybody's probably a little bit different case, but when they move away from the Klan ideology, do they repudiate it wholesale or just kind of moderate out because they're like, well, I don't know how to reconcile it because you're a good friend? I mean,
that's a good question. Some of them wholesale. Others, like, I'll tell you a funny story. I walked into a bar up in Frederick County. It was a bluegrass bar where they played bluegrass music. And, of course, I knew all the musicians. You know, you don't find too many black people in that bar. And I walked in there just a couple of years ago. And everybody, like, turned around frozen, like, looked at me like, uh-oh, you know, what's going on? You know, why is he in here? Who's he? You know, some people thought I was a police officer or something. And I wasn't in any kind of uniform, but why else would a black guy come in there? And so the band recognized me automatically because I knew a lot of the guys. And they, hey, Daryl, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And so then everybody calmed down. And the band kept on playing. And then on the break, you know, they came over to say hello to me. I sat at the bar watching them play, and they came over to say hello. And they asked me if I wanted to sit in. And I said, yeah, sure. So on the next set, you know, they called me up and said, hey, you know, we got a good friend of ours, Daryl Davis, in the audience. We're going to bring him up to play a little bit with us. And I came up there and I played, you know, some of those country songs and all that stuff. And when I went back to my seat, this guy comes over to me and he goes, are you the Daryl Davis with the book? And I knew exactly what he was talking about. And I said, yeah. And I suspected, you know, that he was in the Klan or something. And he says, so you know Donnie and Roger. Donnie was the Grand Dragon, and Roger at that point was the Imperial Wizard. And I said, yeah, they're good friends of mine. And he says, well, you know, Donnie's my best friend, and I got into it because of Donnie. And then when Donnie got out, you know, I got out too. And so I said, oh, okay, well, that's cool, man. I shook his hand. He goes, yeah, you know, Donnie really thinks a lot of you, and Roger really thinks a lot of you. You know, they really like you. This is my first time meeting you, man. You know, I enjoyed the way you play, and da-da-da-da. He goes, man, you know, we got to stick together. I said, yeah, you know, we definitely do. I said, I'm glad you realized that. And I shook his hand again. He goes, yeah, man, because, you know, then he says, quote, unquote, you know, these Spits are taking over our country. So, you know, here he is accepting black people, but now his animus is aimed towards Hispanic people.
So he's got another scapegoat.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, you have some of that, and then you have those who repudiate, you know, the whole ideology.
When you dealt with these Klansmen, when you would explore their ideology, did you delve into the other aspects of their philosophy besides the racial issue with African Americans, or did you look into their views on science and ask them questions about their views on, say, secret societies and global banks and all the things that they have a whole assortment of views. Yeah,
and again, that's all the way across the board too. You know, this one world order and all that stuff. You know, that a lot of them are into or anti. And you know, they have different views on that kind of thing. Some of them know absolutely nothing about it. You know, their knowledge is all across the board.
Mm-hmm. What you mentioned that there were some things you agreed with him. What are some things that you found that you agreed with him about?
Well, for example, we talk about we need better education in schools for kids. We need to get drugs off the street. Things like that, that affect everybody. So when you find those things in common and you build upon the commonalities, the things that you have in contrast, such as skin color, begin to matter less and less.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the types of things that I would agree upon, things that, that affect all of us. Drugs in our society, crime, education, things, neutral things.
Were there any facts that you would throw out or statistics or arguments that you made that they would actually, you'd see the light bulb, turning on and you'd see some, oh, that makes sense. I actually never thought of it that way. Did that ever help, or was it all based on?
In terms of science, no.
Yeah.
In terms of science, no. They don't buy it. You can bring in a stack of books that high, written by all kinds of PhDs and every other letter behind your name, that will tell them that black people have the same size brain as white people. They won't buy it, but they will buy some stupid analogy. And I'll give you an example of one. I'll give you an example of two. This one guy was riding around in my car with me. This one Klansman, and we're talking about different things. And I said, look, because the Klan claims to be a Christian organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, if you're a Christian organization, why do you burn the cross? Isn't that sacrilegious? Isn't it blasphemous? And he said, no, Daryl, we are a Christian organization, and there are two occasions upon which we set the cross aflame. Aflame was the term he used. And he said, one is a cross lighting and one is a cross burning. And I said, I don't care, cross lighting, cross burning. Why are you doing it? Well, I knew the difference. And just to tell you the difference, a cross burning is when they take a 5 or 10 foot cross that has been wrapped in burlap, and the burlap has been soaked in what they call Klan cologne, which boils down to diesel fuel or kerosene, and they come and they stick it in your yard and set it aflame. And that is meant as a threat. That is meant as a warning. We know who you are. You might be a black couple in a white neighborhood, or a homosexual, or Jewish person, or whatever they despise. They burn that cross in your yard as a warning to you to cease and desist, move out, because the next time we come, we mean business. All right, that's called a cross burning. When they have a rally, they have a 20 or 30 foot cross wrapped in burlap, soaked into kerosene or diesel fuel, and set it aflame. And they parade around it and proclaim white power for God, for race, for country, this kind of thing. That's called a cross lighting when it's done ceremoniously. So anyway, he said that they use fire on the cross for two reasons. One, symbolically, they use fire as a purifier. And he asked me if I ever got a splinter in my finger when I was a little kid, and my mom take a needle and stick it in the fire and then dig it out. And I said, yeah. And he says, well, she was purifying the tip of the needle by putting it into the flame. So we use fire as to symbolize purity, and it symbolizes the purity of the white race. And I said, well, okay, fine, but why put it on the cross? And he said, well, if you're a Christian, then you know that Jesus Christ is coming back. And I said, yeah, I'm a Christian. And I said, yeah. And I said, but you have a different Jesus Christ than I do. And he says, no, Daryl, there's only one Jesus Christ. I said, no, there are two. And he says, well, what, is your Jesus Christ black or something? I said, no. I said, he's not black. I said, but I tell you what, he's not white either. I said, I have been to Damascus, Syria, and I've walked along these areas where supposedly, in the old part of Damascus, where Jesus supposedly walked. And he appeared as one of those people over there. And I said, I can tell you right now, those people are olive complected. So if anything, Jesus Christ was olive complected. He said, well, what's your point? I said, my point is, there are two Jesus Christs. You have one and I have one. He goes, no, Daryl, there's only one Jesus Christ. And I said, well, how do you figure? He says, well, if you're a Christian, you would know that Jesus Christ is going to return. So we light the cross to light the way for his return. I said, well, that right there proves that you have a different Jesus Christ than I have. He goes, how do you figure? I said, because you have to light the way for your Jesus Christ. My Jesus Christ lights the way for me. Who are you to light the way for Jesus Christ? And then he got very, very quiet because he'd never heard that rationale before. And after a couple minutes, he changed the subject. And then just a little while later, within 4 or 5 months, he quit the Klan.
Wow.
And his robe was the first robe that I ever got.
Wow.
So, there's a simple analogy that came off the top of my head in response to some dumb thing he said about him, lighting the way for Jesus Christ.
Was your faith, was that a common bridge that really made the difference for a lot of these friendships?
I think my faith definitely played a role in my protection. That I didn't end up getting hurt or killed or whatever else. I think to some degree, they knew where I stood because I was a deacon in my church at one time, and I would bring some of these things up and say, I was a Christian, I am a Christian as well. But to them, black Christians are different than white Christians, So because they have to have that division. So it took a while for them to bridge that divide, but at least they knew who I was and where I stood in terms of religion.
How did the you mentioned that you received flack from some of the African American groups?
Sure.
What was their main issue with you?
Well, those who know me understand what I'm doing and accept what I'm doing. Where some of them may not do it themselves, they appreciate what I'm doing because they know me and know where my heart is and what I'm thinking. And there are others who don't know me, but at least they're smart enough to look beyond the picture of me and a Klansman and say, well, what's going on here? Let me try to find out about this. And they research it. Oh, okay, I see what he's doing. He's talking with them. He's trying to make some kind of heads or tails of sense out of why they hate people, and they get it. Okay, but then there are others who have a visceral reaction, if you will. They see a picture of me sitting down with a Klansman and they go off, and all of a sudden I'm a sellout. I'm a Uncle Tom, an Oreo, all kinds of racial names coming from people who look just like me, and I get that because a Klansman or Klanswoman, they detest seeing a white person with somebody of color, dating that person or married to that person. To them, that white person has betrayed their own race. They have become what they call a race traitor. And they hate that white person even more than they hate the black person that white person is married to or dating. So it's the same thing with black people. When they see a black person like that and they think that person has sold out, that person has become a race traitor to them. Mm. And sometimes, they don't take the time to look beyond what they see on the surface. The old cliche, you can't judge a book by looking at the cover. You got to see the contents. A lot of them don't do that. And that's the problem. And then there are those who, no matter how much you try to explain to them what's going on, like, for example, I had a guy from the NAACP approach me one time, and I used to belong to the NAACP, and approached me and chewed me out and saying, we've worked hard for generations to get 10 steps forward, and you put us 20 steps back by sitting down and talking and having dinner with the enemy. And then I pull out all these robes and hoods, out of my bag because I was giving a lecture. And I said, this is what I've done to put a dent in racism. These people no longer believe in what this stands for. That's why they turned over their uniforms to me. How many robes and hoods have you collected? And then they shut up.
Yeah. Did you interact with the Nation of Islam or the Black Panthers or any of the other groups that are, a little more, I guess, nationalistic for their own? Did you ever interact with them?
I've crossed paths with them and some black separatists and some black supremacists. You would come across them on the fringe. When I was doing all this research, Now, the Black Panther, the original Black Panthers, are not associated with what's called the new Black Panther Party today.
Mm-hmm.
Totally different groups, and in fact, the original Black Panthers do not support the new Black Panthers.
Okay.
Okay, so and then you have these Black Lives Matter groups also, and then Nation of Islam. The guy who headed the new Black Panther Party, he was very big in Nation of Islam. Malik Shabazz is his name, and in fact he went to Howard University where I graduated from. He and I marched together against police brutality and police racism here in Maryland some years ago. But he kind of took a way left turn and became very anti-white, black supremacist, militant kind of thing, and headed up he founded the new Black Panther Party. And he just recently stepped down from the leadership and is on to doing other things for them. But he's a brilliant young guy, lawyer, but I don't agree with his ideology.
So what you're trying to do is, it looks like you're trying to practice what you preach, so to speak, by seeing people as persons, not members of a collectivist group. And that, to me, is the takeaway immediately that I saw just from even just watching the trailer and getting an initial understanding of your message, is that the things that divide us are often found in the group ideologies that we cling to, and that if we stop thinking with that group mentality and start seeing people as persons and reflections of the image of God that we ourselves bear, that's the only way we can break through these never-ending rivalry cycles and animosity.
Exactly. And and two things. One, I don't want to paraphrase here. Martin Luther King, one of my heroes, of course, said that he had a dream, and he said he had a dream that one day the sons of former slaves would sit down at the table of brotherhood with the sons of former slave owners. And that's what I've been trying to accomplish, and that's what I've been accomplishing.
Some people more, on the campus, activists will say, well, they'll say, well, that's kind of a naive assumption because we have systemic racism and America is systemically a white supremacist culture, and there is not a time for dialogue. There's a time for taking back power. I mean, do you see something to what they're saying?
Well, yeah, I hear that all the time. In fact, when you watch the full movie, that will be the exact point that these two people attacked me on from the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, let me just say something about Black Lives Matter movement. The creation of it was a great idea, and still is a great idea, but it has its problems. It was created for the purpose of bringing more awareness to black people, especially males, being shot and killed by white police officers, whether they were armed or not, whether they were in commission of a crime or not, whereby white people in the same position were not getting treated that way. Starting with Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin and all this, that's when this idea of Black Lives Matter was born. And then we saw it with Dylan Roof, who walks into a black church in South Carolina and guns down 9 black people, just murdered them, and then he's taken and arrested with kid gloves on. He's not even thrown on the ground with his arms bent up behind his back, and hustled into a police car. He's gently taken and put into a squad car. Dylan Roof said he was hungry, and the cops took him to Burger King on the way to jail. And here is Eric Garner. You talk about nonviolent crimes. Eric Garner up there in Long Island, he's selling loose cigarettes on the sidewalk. And what do? They choke him to death right on camera. Man said he couldn't breathe, and they kept choking him until he couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
So that's the difference of how we get treated versus how somebody like Dylan Roof gets treated.
Right.
So that's what Black Lives Matter was about. Now, the problem with Black Lives Matter is this: there is no central organization, unlike the NAACP or the Boy Scouts of America, where you have a central headquarters and all policies are disseminated to all the chapters all over the country, so everybody's on the same page. I have people from Black Lives Matter in Detroit, for example, contacting me, asking me for advice. How can they do what I do? Some in New York saying the same thing. The ones in Baltimore saying they disagree with me. Da 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 da. So they're all over the board. There's no one hand knows what the other hand is doing kind of thing. So that's a problem right there. But so what I do is this. They want to attack the system. I want to know why am I wasting my time not trying to tear down the system of white supremacy? Well, the system did not create itself. Man created the system. And that man that created that system is the white supremacist. The white supremacist created that system. The white supremacist runs that system. So rather than me go out and stand with a sign and run up and down the street protesting the system, I want to sit down with the man who created it, the man who supports it, and the man who runs it. And if you can change his mind, then the system is going to reflect that change. So that's what I've been doing. And I don't have anything against what they're doing, but there can be multifaceted avenues by which we can fix this thing. Mm-hmm. So I go after the people, they go after the system. But the second thing I was going to bring up was this: we can change the whole problem. We can solve the whole problem in this country by just one letter. One letter. The difference between, we should be more concerned, take the N out of ethnics. We should be more concerned with ethics than ethics. Just that one letter. Ethics, not ethnics.
Right. That goes back to personalizing what you do. I mean, when Jesus dealt with the woman who was accused of adultery, there was a crowd ready to stone her.
Right.
And he basically posed a question by the way he asked him. He said, "Who's going to cast the first stone?" And when he frames it this way, now they have to deal with the idea that the stone is in their hands, and who is going to be the first guy?
Right. And he posed the question by saying, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Mm-hmm. So, he put it in their court to question themselves.
Right.
He didn't tell them what to do or tell them what they were. He let them answer the question themselves.
Because if he had told them what to do, it would have just created more rivalry. Because they said, "Well, who are you to tell me what to do?"
Precisely, exactly. And that's what I do with these people. I never set out to convert these people. I just set out to get an answer to my question. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? And through the course of conversation, is how the relationship was built. I didn't come in there, blazing guns. You need to get out of the Klan. You're wrong. Give me your robe. Whatever. None of that stuff. And I'll tell you something that even though they all come from different walks of life and they're all stamped from different cookie cutters or whatever, one thing that was a common thread was this. With all these people, no matter where it was in the country, when I would talk with them, they would not ask me any questions initially because I was inferior. They were superior. I don't have any information of any value to them. So if I would say, well, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? They would answer the question, but they wouldn't ask me what I thought because my opinion doesn't matter. I'm just some black guy, Mm-hmm. But then over time, I would say, so, how do you feel about, what Bill Clinton did here, da, 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 da. And they would give me their opinion and they say, well, what do you think, Daryl? Whoa, all of a sudden I've broken through.
Yeah.
Now I have some value. They want to know what I think, like my opinion matters. So that's when they're beginning to respect you, and they're wondering what you think, because they're going to balance what you think with what they think, because they want to check and make sure that they're right.
Yeah, and it seems like you're bringing it back down to the fundamentals of what makes us human, in the sense that no matter what time in human history, culture is formed by sharing stories and sharing a meal.
Exactly.
And it sounds like that's what you were doing. You were bringing it back down to the basics of what it means to be human.
Exactly. And literally, we would go out and have meals. Now, not my first time, but often their first time of sitting down with somebody outside of their own skin color in a social setting. Now, when they go to work, they might have to work with blacks or Hispanics or Asians or what have you, because, they have to draw a paycheck to put food on their table, pay their mortgage or rent or whatever. But when they clock out at 5 o'clock, they don't go to happy hour with black people, or they don't go out to lunch with black people. They only work with them because of a necessity of drawing a paycheck. That's it. But now here they are sitting down having dinner with me, even though they don't like me. But they're sitting down having dinner with me and talking with me and having a beverage with me.
Wow. That goes back to one of the things that the early Christians were attacked about in the Roman Empire. They were very radical in the fact that they believed everybody had equal standing in table fellowship. When you came to a meal, everybody was a brother and sister in Jesus, right?
Right.
And there was no slave master, there was no hierarchy. And the Roman pagans at the time, they hated that because theirs was a very strict hierarchical structure.
Right.
The master was always served first, right, and then there was a strict delineation down the line, and then the slaves ate in another separate place.
Right.
And in the Christian ethic, going back to what you said, that word ethic, that Christian ethic broke through that hierarchy. And yes, it's not been practiced as it should, as we know, to this day, but it's slowly, you see that in history, that it's a radical thing when you break down table politics. It seems so simple, but it's a radical thing.
Yeah, break bread together. Exactly. It's a radical concept, but it works. As simple as it is.
So what's your, in closing, what's your takeaway message? You talked about ethics. What do you have some ideas about? Do you have a vision for what the ethic of our nation should strive towards? That we can find common bond. When you were talking about, just kind of as a side comment, when you were talking about, meeting these people, I thought, man, wouldn't it be great if the Black Lives Matter group, some of their leaders could interact with police, heads of police groups, and sit down and have a meal with them and film like what you did, and let them just work it out and have a meal.
Exactly. And there are those who will, but there are those who won't. Like I said, they're not on these groups are not on the same page.
Right.
And that's very unfortunate. But that's exactly what it takes, David. And I tell people, what we see today is a lot of social media. People hide behind social media. They hide behind the computer and type out their blogs and their opinions, and they attack this person. You don't even know where it's coming from on their Twitter or whatever. Or this person will go on CNN and bash that person over there. That person over there will get on Fox News and bash this person over here who was on CNN talking about him. And then if they both happen to be on MSNBC together, they talk at each other.
Right.
So, they're either talking about each other or they're talking at each other. Nobody is sitting down talking with each other. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do. I talk with these people. Okay? And I have this two things. One, while you are actively learning about someone else, at the same time, you are passively teaching them about yourself. So you always want to be honest, because you think you're gleaning all this information from them, and you may be, but at the same time, they're gleaning stuff from you by your body language, your behavior, your attitude, etc. And so it's always best, to be honest, be upfront. If you don't agree with them, fine, disagree politely, and challenge them. Say, hey, I need more explanation as to why you think I should believe the way you believe. And when you do things like that, chances are they'll give you a platform. They'll reciprocate and let you explain why. And, make sure you've done your homework. You have all your facts together so you can give your platform in an intelligent and influential manner. And at the end of the day, you each have to think about what the other person said. So at least a seed is planted. But also, the second thing was, I believe, when two enemies are talking, they're not fighting. They might be yelling and screaming and beating their fists on the table to drive home a point, but at least they're talking. They're not fighting. It's when the talking ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence. So you always want to keep the conversation going.
Do you think we're in a moment in our culture where we can see some serious progress in healing these hatreds and building unity and understanding, or do you think the road is very, very far away from that?
I think we're in the infantile stages of that. I think that that Donald Trump is the best thing that has happened to this country. Not necessarily in terms of his being president and how he's going to lead. That remains to be seen. But in the fact that he was elected and all the stuff that we're seeing is all coming out. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing, because for a long time, people were denying that racism existed. Oh, we're in a post-racial society. You got a black guy in the White House, blah, blah, blah. No. We're seeing swastikas all over the place, KKK all over the place, high school kids taunting their Mexican college classmates, things like that. We're seeing all this. So now nobody can turn a blind eye to it. Nobody can deny it. And you cannot address what you can't see. So it's like, you hear some noise in your car and you know something's wrong because it's not running right. And so you take it to the mechanic. But of course, when you get there, the noise is gone. And what does the mechanic tell you? Well, I can't fix what I can't hear. I can't fix what I can't see. Well, this country has a big problem with racism. And people can deny it all they want. But now there's no more denying it, no more turning a blind eye, because we're seeing it, post-election. And that's a good thing, because now if you see it, you can identify it. And as a result of this, of these people coming out, there are more conversations about this. That's why you're talking to me. There are more conversations about it, more groups are starting. So, like I said, it's in its infantile stages, and it's still got a ways to go before we really get a grip on it. I've been seeing it for a long time because I've been working in that arena. But a lot of people who don't necessarily see it, like, oh my God, the Klan! I thought they had gone away in the 1960s. What are they doing marching down the street? That kind of thing. I see a lot of that. But here's what we need to do. You take, for example, 9/11. Before 9/11, this country was very divided. And 9/11 hit us, and all of a sudden the country came together. We came together as Americans. It didn't matter if you were black or white or what you were. You were an American. We'd been attacked. We all came together and stood arm in arm, protecting each other. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, there was no mechanism in place to hold us together, because it's never happened before. And so over time, we began drifting apart. And here we are today, once again. The whole 9/11 thing that brought us together is in the rearview mirror. We're no longer together. Same thing with Hurricane Katrina. It brought people together because, it affected everybody down there in New Orleans. Yeah. Okay? But because there was nothing to hold them together, they drifted apart. Well, we're divided right now. And this election is spurring a lot of people, wondering, are we going to self-destruct because we hate each other, and we can't get along with one another and this, that, and the other? We need to come together and work things out. Well, we're going to do that. It's going to be a hard road to hoe, so to speak, but we can do it. But we need something in place that keeps us together.
What is that? What's that mechanism?
That mechanism is taking the taboo off the conversation of race, off the conversation of religion. Let's have these conversations. People don't want to talk about those things. It was like when I'm 58 years old. When I was in junior high school, whatever, sex ed was being introduced, and parents were going crazy. They didn't want their kids learning about that stuff from teachers in school. That's not what we're sending our kids to school for. But yet, those same parents were not teaching their kids about it at home. But guess what? If you're not learning it at home and you're not learning it in school, your kid's going to learn it, and where's it going to be? out on the street, and
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to learn about it the wrong way. So if you wanted your child to have sex education in school back then, when I was in school, you had to bring a note signed by your parents saying it was okay, and then you would learn a little bit about it in phys ed class or in health class. Today, sex education is part of the regular curriculum. That taboo has been lifted. As a result, kids are more informed about STDs, venereal disease, family planning, contraception. They can make better choices, about teenage pregnancy, what to do to avoid it, abstinence, et cetera, et cetera. So that information has made them wiser and more knowledgeable and has helped them. The same taboo that has been put on the conversation of race needs to be lifted. So people can come together, turn all the cards face up on the table, dispel myths about each other and fears about each other, and get to know one another.
And that's really a message that the whole world needs to see, because whatever country you go to, there's always some, in crowd and group thinks, whether it's ethnically divided or racially or religiously, and they're constantly, doing abominable things to each other all over the world. So everyone, this is a message that applies to all countries,
sure.
Really.
I've been to 53 different countries on 6 continents. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it, with religions. I've seen it with tribes. But the only place I've seen it be racial as bad is only right here. Yeah, I mean, some other countries have some race issues, but not as bad as here.
Mm. And that might be due to the fact of the melting pot and the different kind of cultural events that happened in America.
Yeah.
Well, I very much appreciate the things that you've shared today, and I thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
And I wish you all the best of luck and Godspeed as you continue to spread this message. This is something that I think everyone needs to hear in this country, especially in this time when this is a topic that's being debated every day on TV and in conversations, water cooler conversations. So, again, Accidental Courtesy. It's coming out February 13th at PBS, right? At what time?
It's at 10 p.m. Eastern on the PBS program Independent Lens.
Okay, and you can check that out. And where else can we find your content going forward if we want to stay in touch?
Absolutely. People can find me at daryldavis.com. That's DARYL, one R, DARYL, Davis, DAVIS.com, and they can email me at daryl@daryldavis.com.
Well, thanks a lot, and I appreciate it. Thank you for what you're doing.
My pleasure. Call anytime.